The Paper Mario censorship is causing outrage. Paper Mario and the Thousand-Year Door is often regarded as the greatest Paper Mario game ever made, and it built upon everything that made the first game great. It offered up an expansive turn-based JRPG that could be considered up there with any other game in the genre. Sadly, past this point, all of the Paper Mario games would end up with these strange and unconventional mechanics as part of their gameplay. That might be down to the fact that the Mario and Luigi RPGs ended up becoming Nintendo's main Mario RPGs instead. But when we consider that a large chunk of the GameCube library remains stuck on the GameCube, people were absolutely ecstatic that this game was announced to be coming to the Switch. But, and there is always a but, that doesn't mean that this hasn't come without its fair share of drama. So about a month ago on here I reported that a few people had noticed that the dialogue in certain scenes in the Thousand-Year Door had been heavily altered, which actually ended up changing the context of those scenes. So one of the biggest examples of this relates to Bowser, the villainous fiery monster who's always kidnapping women and taking part in special military operations inside of the Mushroom Kingdom and other surrounding sovereign states. Despite Bowser being prominently positioned as a villain, Nintendo deemed it necessary to alter some of his dialogue so that he wasn't quite so mean to members of his Koopa Troop. More specifically, they chose to remove dialogue which radicals would consider fat shaming. Apparently, Bowser telling a turtle to do more sit-ups, Tubby, is very offensive to our sensitive Western ears. The result of this is that Bowser has gone from cucking Mario to becoming the cuck. But they've also removed the context from another scene which completely changes it altogether. So as you can probably recall, there is a playable character who can join your party called Goombella, and then when her and Mario end up in Rogueport, she ends up being catcalled by some other Goombas. So that catcalling has ended up being removed because we can't have some obviously morally grey characters behaving misogynistically. I mean, of course, that would be a step too far for characters who want to be portrayed as being unsavoury. I'm probably best off just showing you what it is that they removed and what they have replaced it with, and in the original version it reads like this. Hey man, what's up? Who's the hottie you got there with you? Then we end up seeing a gang of 3 Goombas come onto the scene. One of them's wearing a very sharp, pointy, dangerous looking hat, and there's another one who is clearly high, and that one shouts out, "What's up baby, why don't you hang with us for a while, we play real nice." Man, what's a fine looking Goomba doing with a tubby moustache man like that? Then you have Goombella respond with sarcasm, which is pretty much how I think most women would probably respond to this, and she shouts out, "Oh, it is like so sweet that you boys think I'm cute, seriously." And then she tells them that they make her want to throw up, and basically tells them to f*** off. So those Goombas then act the victim and then end up attacking Mario and Goombella before inevitably losing to them. I'm not really sure why they needed to take that out, because I thought that it made Goombella look strong and capable, and then showed her standing up to bullies. It also demonstrated that sexism is bad and should not be tolerated. So yes, in the new dialogue, which is much duller, the Goombas take issue with Mario and Goombella from apparently being from the surface, which is much more affluent than Rogueport's underground. They accuse Mario of being a snob and being stuck up for having privileges like clean air to breathe. It's just a completely different scene altogether now, and I don't think it has the same impact as before. So yeah, then the Goombas proceed to tell Mario and Goombella that they're going to teach them some manners, and then they attack. I don't understand what message they're trying to put forward to you. What is it, that poor people are going to probably attack you? It's gone from being a character building scene to one that is arguably classist instead, and I'm just baffled as to why they made that decision. So at the time of producing this video, there's been even more outrage about censorship come out about the game, but this time surrounding the character Vivian, and this time it seems to be causing even more outrage. So some of the sources that are covering this story are saying that Vivian is now being accurately represented from her original Japanese source material now. Other sources are claiming that this is a DEI related retcon that compromises the original story told. Now, Which one is it? Because both of these stories are so drastically different from each other that it would be impossible for both of them to be correct. Now, one thing that I will say though is that one of these sides is choosing to omit quite a bit of information from the narrative. So the first source that I want to have a quick look at would be Kotaku. Now, many people would label Kotaku as extremely left-leaning, and in their article about this, they are saying that the new English localization of the game finally restores the trans identity of one of the characters, as I mentioned earlier, Vivian. So they would pair their title of this article with a picture of Mario, or specifically Paper Mario, waving a trans flag. Now, I feel that's somewhat a little bit misleading, but if you look at the image credit, they actually credit both Nintendo and themselves, which means that they're essentially owning up to doctoring the image to get Mario waving a trans flag. So I want to give you some more context to the situation by reading the first couple of paragraphs from their article, which are actually 100% accurate. So they go like this. Vivian is a villain turned party member in The 1,000-Year Door. When Mario first meets the witch, she's a member of the antagonistic Shadow Sirens group alongside her sisters Beldam and Marilyn. It's clear she doesn't get along with her sisters and that they bully her, but the specifics of how and why were slightly different in the English and German localizations on the GameCube than they were in the original Japanese version. In that version, Vivian was often referred to with male pronouns as an insult, despite her asserting that the Shadow Sirens were made up of 3 sisters. The group's introduction in Japanese and several other localizations had Vivian introduce the group as sisters, which led to her sisters insulting her and referring to her as a man. The English localization, however, rewrote the scene to make her misstate the group's name as the Shadow Beauties, which prompted angry but non-gendered insults regarding her appearance from her sisters. So as I said earlier, those 2 paragraphs for the most part are basically true. It's the next paragraph which is a bit naughty. In the Switch remake, Vivian explicitly discusses her gender identity and her sister's transphobia with Mario. She says she realised that she was their sister, not their brother, and that her sister's bullying has gotten worse since. The constant berating from her sisters is what prompts Vivian to join Mario's party, and now new and old players can see the original context in 2024. So basically it's distorting the truth. That last sentence in particular is distorting the truth about how the remake is faithful to the original Japanese source material. The final sentence is at best a misconception and at worst an intentional lie, to basically perpetuate the narrative that they want you to believe. They're misleading people into believing that no retconning has taken place, but instead we're being served the original delivery. And that's simply not true and verifiably easy to disprove. I feel that the article was actually intentionally really short, and I think it's because the discussion involved has some very nuanced levels of complexity to it, and they just didn't want to go into that. But it's actually the final sentence of the article that really sums up exactly what the writer thought. They've prioritised adding in this particular line over reporting accurately what actually happened. They write, Vivian's story only takes up a few scenes, but now you get the satisfaction of taking down transphobic arseholes on the Switch. So it's my opinion that the complexities for this have been purposefully omitted because the writer was more interested in delivering a piece that was going to be used and weaponized against those with differing political opinions to themselves. But the article would more or less have been fine were it not for that last sentence. Again, Kotaku have just proved that they're more interested in pushing an agenda rather than reporting on facts. So now that we've looked at an article from the left, let's take a look at an article from the right. That Park Place would also report on this, and they do tend to report from a rather right-wing lens. Their article is completely different from the one that has been delivered by Kotaku. So that Park Place would mention that they believe that Nintendo of America have made Vivian a trans character, even though he or she, depending on which region you played the game in originally, was not originally a trans character, and they would back this up by saying, as noted by YouTuber Shortfatataku during an appearance on Side Scrollers, the original Japanese version of the game describes the character as an otokonoko, or a femboy, basically a male who dresses up in women's clothes. Shortfatataku explains while reading a post from Majinken 1987, in the original party info and in the original game and Gumbella's tattle log, it says that Vivian is an otokonoko, an effeminate male otherwise known as a male daughter or femboy, or a trap. Not trans, that's a delusional headcanon. His catch card uses the same word, again, not trans. Next, Shortfatataku shared the catch card which reads, one of Mario's partners introduced in Paper Mario the Thousand-Year Door, a cute boy wielding fire magic who was once part of a group of enemies known as the Shadow Trio. So I think the first thing to mention about this is that the information delivered in that article directly conflicts what was written in the Kotaku piece. And also I'm pretty confident that a large majority of people who are trans would say that there would be a difference between being trans or being a crossdresser slash femboy. What I will say though is I do think it's amusing that it's the right-wing article that is pointing out the difference between being trans and being a crossdresser, rather than the left-leaning article, which I would have thought would be a bit more hot on details like that. Basically, I feel that the left-leaning website saying that the character has always been trans is just simply not true. So, for clarity, I have met people who are trans, and I've also met people who are cross-dressers, and they are not the same thing. They lead extremely different lives, and I think a massive important factor here is that people who are cross-dressers are not dysphoric in their biological bodies. They like dressing in the opposite gender's clothes, and that can be on occasion or it can be all the time, but they don't feel the need to formally transition to the opposite gender. I feel like Kotaku should have been able to differentiate the difference between these rather than basically promoting outright lies to win an argument. Like, there wasn't that kind of argument there in the first place. They've made a point that didn't exist. The rest of the That Park Place article seems to actually take a lot of issue with Nintendo actively advertising for Nintendo of America DEI related job roles. I personally do not like the idea of people receiving DEI related jobs over meritocracy. That's my personal opinion. I just feel like that I wouldn't say that this particular revision to Vivian is even necessarily a bad thing. I just feel like there's bad faith reporting on both sides in this instance. Both, I feel, are intentionally trying to spin a yarn to create outrage and division. I think that the reality of it is it's actually probably a lot more simple than it's being put out to be. I think that the original depiction of Vivian in the Japanese source material was represented differently in the English localized version put out by Nintendo of America, and I think it was probably more along the lines of Nintendo of America probably just weren't comfortable with explaining cross-dressing to children. It was easier back then to omit that detail and just make Vivian a girl from the get-go. However, with trans people now being represented more regularly in Western media, it would now be an incredibly simple retcon to make to just make Vivian trans now. I think it's important to point out as well that even though in the original Japanese source material that the character of Vivian was classed as a cross-dresser, in her dialogue she did express that she wanted to be female, so I don't see a problem with therefore making the character trans now. I mean, it's a lot more common now than it was 20 years ago, and they clearly wanted to identify as female even though they were labelled as male back then. I don't see a problem with it. So, going back to the two articles, which one lied and which one told the truth? Well, Kotaku outright lied and misled their audience, whereas That Park Place was a lot more factual in their delivery, but they did still omit a lot of context that was quite important to the original character, and did also omit reasons why it would make sense for that character to have been changed accordingly. I think that therefore the answer would be that if you want to formulate coherent opinions, you need to check multiple different sources, because more often than not, those sources are putting forward a particular agenda. It's better to check things from the wider political spectrum to then be able to come up with a nice, sensible, centrist point of view. Basically, you need to get into the habit of fact-checking things for yourself, and there's enough tools online for you to be able to do this yourself without having really any problems in being able to do that. And everyone needs to stop being so bloody partisan about everything. Like, we're never going to get rid of all of this horrible division and divide until people stop being so black and white and tribal about everything that ever happens. So if you got around to this point in the video, thank you so much for sticking around. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to treat yourself to up to 90% off of a lovely brand new game, then please check out my Instant Gaming affiliate link in the description and in the pinned comment down below. Thank you very much and see you next time.